This is an active thought that I'm working through. The idea that automation isn't necessarily bad, and the dimensions that we experience add dimension to the things that we experience. And there are a lot of options, and they have different kinds of benefit, and social structures that are recognizable are social structures that we can use to communicate with other people who recognize those social structures. So this kind of leads me to a somewhat traditionalist lens on career paths and development, although I recognize that there are a lot of unreasonable biases baked into some of those decision-making processes. So hybridizing multiple different fields, imagining that we have prime numbers and we're discovering new primes, and we can multiply and create factorizations that are unique combinations of two distinct fields. And I think this is partially an exploration on distinction versus difference, and also the social calculus that goes into evaluating why people make decisions. So as we integrate new differentials, what are the structures that we're discovering in those considerations? This is also partially considering numeracy, our ability to interpret numbers and relate to their combinations, and just various forms of literacy as conceptual frameworks. Terrence Howard mentioned some operation where one along this operation about 1 is equal to 2. And the operation is different than addition, and he called it multiplication. I think there are different axioms that you can derive if you accept that as true, and you would just be using a different set of accepted axioms. We can combine specific beliefs like chemistry and figure out some of their interactions with themselves and others. This points to the Church-Turing thesis, which is a computational... It's a computational discovery that basically two guys discovered the same process for evaluating language. And it was weird because, how did you do that? And how did I do that? And why is it that the hole at the bottom of my language is the same hole at the bottom of yours? And describing ourselves and another as binary opposites along one specific dimension of consideration, I think, is an interesting concept. So this original thought train got started because some people felt that GPT-4o responded better to certain prompts than therapists, which I think is one way to look at an interaction. That is, an interaction that someone can have. And I believe that reflecting on one's thoughts and having something to bounce those ideas off of can be therapeutic. Though I also believe that people who are trained in therapy or various practices of therapy have relationships to the spaces around specifically what is therapeutic, and they can guide more people to more generalizable paths of discovery. So it's a good idea for people to explore and digest and discover why they relate to ChatGPT as an internal process that pushes back with a credible amount of inquiry if they structure those thoughts in a way that makes that possible. There are people who can help structure prompts to make them more useful as a consistent plane of inquiry about oneself. Spiritually, these people have been given different names throughout different paradigms, and having structure like the scientific method to be able to evaluate the specific impact of certain paradigms, I think, is a good idea. Pretty much. I think that it's a good idea to have a relationship to the harder to place language, like spirituality, as well as more specifically defined language that seeks to discover and name emergent properties rather than name them before they're discovered. Long story short, there are going to be different dimensions that emerge because of the technological changes that we have access to. And it's important to have people who are trained in relating to people and walking through specific patterns of conception. This is kind of a societal role anyway, and formalizing it with fields of practice is a good idea. Having language makes it easier to describe ideas, and sharing language makes it easier to explore ideas in common. So when people have a lot of practice exploring ideas, it's a good idea to explore ideas with them so you can see how you might do that on your own. And also, one benefit of therapy is that you can have a consistent relationship with someone whose purpose in that dimension is to be consistent. We embody a lot of the emotions that we process, and practicing doing that and having a reason to do it consistently, I think, is kind of underrated.